So the aim of this video is to help you understand what sets Node Enterprise apart from other commercially available applications. It would also help you understand why this is better described as a digital ecosystem as opposed to just one large application. By the way, this dashboard shows you my current network. These are all nodes, agents, essentially. These are the current set of nodes in my network for this profile. And most of them are stored in servers I have across the globe. Others are basically just running on the cloud. One of them I have essentially rigged to run on this computer. Let's pause this rotation. And so for the sake of this demonstration, I have already logged in. There's no point doing that. But that is essentially the same thing you see here, except I'm logged in to this one. And so, as you can see, you get a lot with this application. And as you can see, these are two separate apps, which again buttresses the whole point that this is more of an ecosystem. This is one of three applications that all make up Node Enterprise. Now, this lets you see logs. You get a dashboard that comes with an API you can look into if you need to. You can see all the agents currently installed on the device. You have your favorite Claude code over there. There are a bunch of others too, Codex. There's a Vision node, Gemini, and this is for speech to text, Cursor as well. So a fleet of agents that are useful for different operations. There's also a vault, and you can also see running processes. What I intend to do today is sort of demonstrate the utility of having a system installed on your server. One of the biggest advantages, which we'll be demonstrating today, is you don't need to have data uploaded into someone else's computer, right? Which is essentially what you're doing when you communicate with most AI applications out there, which is what makes this a better choice for businesses in key sectors like healthcare and finance. So I have a set of documents on this computer. These are tax documents, and this is what we will essentially be analyzing today. So let's go back to the chat. I'll create a new chat. Okay. And let's ask it to use two nodes. Again, nodes in this context are basically agents encapsulated with memory, with the ability to audit, and easy to add to the network. And we would essentially ask it to use two of those nodes, one of them being an MCP node. The other is a server port orchestrator, which is just a fancy name for an agent that is able to coordinate other agents on the server. You have the ability to see logs as they're happening in real time. So what we've asked it to do is basically just confirm that it has access to these files, right, on the server. So it's going to try to figure out how to use the MCP and the server port orchestrator to find those files in my personal server, right, which is basically just a Mac. Obviously, this is device agnostic, so if your business uses Linux, the same thing sort of applies. And you can see all of this happening in real time. I believe it's already done, but these are all the logs. You can see the server port orchestrator was communicating with Claude. Okay, that's an interesting choice. But one of the benefits of this system is that you're able to use a native platform, a native feature in the platform to perform audits, and I'll demonstrate that pretty soon. But yes, it looks like it does have access to that directory. The MCP node does. We have an MCP server within Node Enterprise client that allows it to access the directory. And of course, Cloud Code can do the same thing, which is why the server pod probably chose that. But let's go ahead and look at the trace. And this is a key aspect of Node Enterprise, is that it allows you to perform audits using native features, right? So you can see exactly what the server pod orchestrator did. The global orchestrator is basically your front end, right? It's the agent that you are constantly communicating with. And the MCP node is the first agent I asked it to speak to. And there are different ways you can visualize this, right? You can use a tree view, which allows you to see the flow much better. So you can see it did so in parallel, which is pretty useful, right? So you don't have to wait for both transactions to complete first. So it sent the first to the MCP node, it sent the second to the server pod, and because these two are orchestrators, they basically get to choose, right, what they think is appropriate based on the prompt. And you can go deeper, right? You can look into the duration, the time, you can see what was sent out and what it received, right? And so this is a very important aspect of what makes this system very useful. It's not just its ability to use what is essentially a fleet of agents, right? There are those that are installed on the client, but you can always add more, right? This is my current network, but there's also the public network where you can even add and find other useful agents. One of them is the Zapier node. And what you can do essentially is you can inherit a new node, you can clone an existing node. So let's do just that, right? Let's use the Zapier node. I already have that installed. I have a plugin that allowed me to add my Zapier API key. And what you're going to see is we're going to build a workflow that allows us to use connectors from Zapier to automate the processes with Node Enterprise. So let's go back to that same chat. And let's say I'll create a new workflow to analyze each one of those tax documents one by one until all 38 documents have been analyzed. The final result of the analysis should be posted on Slack using the Zapier node. So on my Zapier, I have access to Slack, which is already pre-configured. And it can work with that to complete specific tasks using those connectors. Another thing you could do, we'll probably do this on a different demonstration, is you could also use NETax. So you can use the MCP feature on NETax to combine the features that come with that platform with Node Enterprise. Okay. So it looks like it did just that, right? And it went ahead and described what that loop looks like. Right, so the workflow is now ready to be executed. Let's take a look. And so this is the autopilot feature. And in simple terms, what this does is it allows you to create workflows that can run consistently. Right, so if you have a task that you want to be repeated at a certain frequency, let's say every single day or every single month, a couple times during the week, you use the autopilot feature to do this. And that's essentially what we've built. Now, if you notice, the first time I asked this question, I asked it to use the SPO, the server pod orchestrator, and the MCP node. But then it figured out that since this file or these files are hosted locally on the device, and it can see that these are JPEGs, right? These are images, then it's much better to use the Edge Vision agent. The reason why the system can do this is because the system is learning. And notice I didn't say the model, I said the system. See, Node Enterprise uses reinforcement learning to help the system do just that, learn, right? But it uses a specific type of reinforcement learning. It uses queue-based learning. And so what that looks like is you would see this. And so these are essentially the reward functions, the states, and it's using this over time to learn what the best path is moving forward. Now, the reward function over time, maybe if we have time in a different video, I would show you what that reward function would look after it's done enough traces, enough sessions. But it starts to change the reward, and it uses that information to learn what to do next time. Right? So you can see this time it chose to go with the edge function, edge vision agent, because this is a much better node to process that data. And it used that when it was building out this workflow. And typically what happens after this is when you eventually turn this on, it gets added to a state machine. And that state machine is basically responsible for running this at the frequency you want. It's not active right now, but you can see what it looked like for other workflows. So this video is already pretty long, so we'll just keep it short enough at this point. In future videos, we'll explain how to set up the client, right? How to set up the server. We'll probably use a visualizer next time so you can see what that looks like. And this basically allows you to speak with your orchestrators rather than just having to type all the time. And we'll also dive deeper into the state machine and maybe even look into how protocols work, right? I touched briefly on the model context protocol and how that helps with some of the work you can do with Node Enterprise. But we'd also talk about how the A2A protocol actually plays a significant role in how you bring this framework together.